self-awareness goes way beyond being an effective leader in business or government or academia, right? Self-awareness is a really important life skill. An important step for my growth, an important insight rather, was to sort of recognize my need for benevolent authorities and recognize my need to have rules asserted on me by an external agent as a first step to sort of cultivate my own self-trust and develop faith in my own ability to handle uncertainty and danger with less of a need for external support.
Welcome to the True Leadership Podcast, where we sit down with executive leaders to explore what leadership really means through the lens of their stories, their wins, their struggles, their vision, and their lessons along the way. I'm Ty Hammond, founder of One Mountain Leadership and creator of the True Leadership Approach, an awareness-based path that helps leaders shift their focus from what to do about their problems to how to grow from them. Whether you're just stepping into leadership or are well-seasoned and at the top of your game, your potential won't be realized following someone else's script. But you can draw insights from their stories and turn it into wisdom by putting it into practice in your own life. Welcome to the True Leadership Podcast, where we explore the essence of leadership beyond tactics and performance by sitting down with executives to hear what matters most to them. I'm your host, Ty Hammond. Today's guest is Dave Blakely. Dave is an independent board member, venture builder, and adventure investor. He helps global 1,000 companies and startups turn emerging technology and large customer needs into new lines of business. He uses his prior experiences at Mach 49 to lead venture building and corporate investing programs that assemble entrepreneurial teams, apply proven startup and VC methods inside enterprises, and move ideas from discovery to scale. Previously Director of Technology Strategy at IDEO, Dave has generated billions in client value, earned 6 patents, and taught innovation at Stanford and UC Berkeley. An early employee at 2 successful startups and an active angel investor, he is known for synthesizing customer insight into disruptive ventures and for translating Silicon Valley practices into repeatable growth capabilities for global organizations. It's a pleasure for me to have Dave on the podcast today. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Oh, thanks, Ty. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. First question here that I like to start with. Every leader has a beginning. I've found that, of course, who we are as leaders and at work and in life, it starts taking shape long before we find ourselves in an executive room or even before our career begins. I'm curious if you'd be willing to share, who's someone from your early life or maybe an early experience that you felt shaped the kind of leader and person that you are today?
Yeah, I've had the tremendous luxury of working with some really fantastic leaders. So it's good to be talking to you about them, and also some where I pattern myself around being what they are not, frankly. I think I wanted to, as we talk over the next half hour or so, Ty, wanted to name some people that aren't household names, but who have meant a lot to me in my life. The first engineering job I ever had, I was a new graduate electrical engineer. And the truth about engineering is, even if you do internships, you don't really know what in the hell you're doing on your first job. I was hired by a spin-out, a small startup that was a spin-out of Hewlett-Packard, to design a robot arm for a very complex robot arm for a very complex piece of machinery called an electron spectrometer. I didn't know what I was doing. My boss, whose name was Ken Miller, I didn't appreciate what a great thing this was at a time. He brought in a consultant to do the first revision of the robot arm. And then he had me refine it. And he had my back every step of the way, helping me, doing the sort of classic, this is from decades ago, but the classic HP management by walking around thing. When the robot arm was complete, when it was shipping to customer sites all over the world, he ran around telling everybody that I had designed it. That's true generosity. And to this day, Ken Miller, my boss at my very first company, which was called Kevex, stands out as an example of truly generous leadership. And he's one of many people that's really inspired me on my journey.
Gosh, I just love that story so much. And part of what I really, you said had my back. So throughout the whole process, he had your back. And at the end, he gave you the credit.
Yeah.
Those are a couple of the pieces that I've seen there. I'm curious, expounding on that experience a little bit, how has that shaped the leader that you've become?
So, here again, it's been a wonderful career at places like IDEO and Mach 49, and my leadership style has been shaped by everyone from Navy admirals to Global 1000 CEOs who I've been lucky enough to meet, to some incredibly inspiring startup CEOs. And I the currently here's what I think of as the four attributes of success for true authentic leadership. I think of people who are inspired and inspirational, who are humble, and who are execution focused. And just a few words on each of those. When I
Great.
say inspired, I'm talking about someone who has a true vision, who sees a world different from the world we live in today, like David Kelly, the founder of IDEO, who saw a world in which design thinking would really change the way we go about our day. Inspirational means the ability, not through slutty persuasion methods, but through setting an example and getting people genuinely excited about that vision. Inspirational means getting people above you, at your level, and reporting to you, down below you, sincerely excited and engaged with your vision. Sometimes these people can be very quiet. For many years, a man who I greatly admire, the director of research at Google, Peter Norvig, was a very quiet presence, but wherever he went, people found him extraordinarily inspirational. When I say humble, let me tell you what that means. That's my third attribute, is
I love
humble.
that one.
Humble has a specific meaning here. Every first rate leader I've met, every one of them is really good at something. They're brilliant strategists. They're wonderful at operations. They're technical whizzes. They're marketing and sales geniuses. That's great, but that's not enough. You also need the humility to surround yourself with first rate people, usually at the C level, who will buoy you up and who will augment the areas where you are less strong. And I would say there's a holding company I really love called Infinity Constellation, and there's a young CEO named Brendan Pothedes who's a really good example there. And then finally, execution focused. Every single leader I've seen only has patience for activities like strategy discussions or market research, in as much as it delivers directly on their goals for the organization. Quick example, a man named Tyler Schilling, who started the world's best underwater robotics company called Schilling Robotics. He makes these amazing robots that operate 2 miles beneath the surface of the sea. He's happy to brainstorm, he's happy to engage in market research, but he has a really good sense of diminishing returns and where it is that you are diverging from the core mission and the core challenge of the company.
Well, I love that. There's a couple of different things that you said in there. I'd like
Yeah.
to, in particular, the inspiration piece. I think
Mhm.
often, part
Mhm.
of what I hear in that inspiration piece is influence, right?
Yes.
And what's the magic sauce of that? And I love that you called out that it's, not necessarily a charismatic leader. It doesn't
Yeah.
really depend on what, your personality. That any kind of person can be that. But part of what
Yeah.
comes up for me there, I think of like, you can tell someone to do something, but you can't tell them to want to do it.
Yeah.
What is that magic sauce? And the next one that you followed up with there, that humility, I think really added to that point, because it's, what are the people that we surround ourselves with?
Hmm.
And that humility, to there's something in that of like, even especially the smartest people in the world, I think of like the difference between being the smartest person in the room and having all of the answers, between being the wisest person in the room and having all of the best questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Or being the person in the room who makes, if I make you think I'm the most interesting person in the room, versus being the kind of guy that makes you feel like you're the most interesting person in the room.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just to respond to your first point, Ty, in terms of what leaders I see as truly engaging,
Hmm.
I see leaders who are engaging and who develop tremendous affinity with their colleagues and their boards and their reports and so on. If two things are true, the first is if they believe in the vision. And you might think, well, a top leader, a CEO, of course they believe in the vision. They don't. If you're lying to yourself if you're taking a job and you're putting your best foot forward and you're putting on your happy face and you don't really believe what it is you're saying, people will sense it. People will smart, and it is an insult to feign enthusiasm for something that you don't really believe in. It's transparent, and it will ultimately, you're demeaning the people around you, and ultimately they will catch on. So for a top leader, either create something or sign on to something that you can sincerely get behind, or don't do it at all.
I
Now,
love that. I mean, it really points to the word truth and true leadership. There's
it
something
sure does.
about that, right? It's like the extent of authenticity there. And I can't agree with you enough more there, Dave, that, even if people may not know what it is, we all have these authenticity meters built in, right?
Yes.
Through years of evolution. So
Yes.
we can't fake or feign these things. And, the willingness to be honest with, what we're actually aligned with is so important there. you
Yes.
know I'm
Yes.
curious to this, and I'm going to be carrying those four things. I love it when, having such clear direction on those. And I guess I'm curious in my next question here. I'm guessing that those don't come from nowhere, right? And maybe this next question leads a little bit into that. Of course, every leader faces moments that test and shape them. I'm curious if you can tell me about an experience that really challenged you. Maybe an experience that became a turning point in your own leadership journey and the impact that it has on who you are and how you lead today.
Mhm. We all want to be liked. It's the most fundamental human tendency in the world, right? Or the majority of us want to. Some of the most difficult experiences I've had were, just as you might expect, firing people for underperformance or complete lack of performance, laying people off at different companies over the years because of an economic downturn, and at one point dealing with unhappy customers who don't want to pay and haggling over money. And the reason I bring it up is, if you're like me, if you're like so many of us, you stall in those conversations and you can't stall. And here's a really good countermeasure to problems like that is create a network of mentors who you trust and who will call you on the carpet when you're being stupid, right? I had a mentor who said, don't give me that, oh, today isn't the right day. You're going to talk to the guy tomorrow to put him on a performance plan. No, 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 no. It's only going to get worse. And it's not fair to either of you, to either you or the company or the employee in question, if you stall. And it seems obvious, but the fact is, for me at least, having an external push when it's always too easy to procrastinate and think of a reason to avoid a difficult conversation, that's been a really healthy thing for me. And so, in terms of lessons learned, I now have a small internal advisory board who I really trust. They're not part of the organization. They're not investors in me, and therefore I can be completely frank with them. And they're not afraid to tell me when I'm being stupid and when I'm being cowardly and when I'm being too aggressive and when I'm falling prey to cognitive bias. They'll give it to me straight, and that's just gold. Any leader needs that.
Well, I absolutely love that. And similarly, I'm thinking here as you're talking about your mentors, the mentors that I've been fortunate enough to have in my life, and what a massive difference that's made in terms of and I love the story that you provided there. I'm curious, and I've talked with a lot of leaders. There's plenty of leaders who come up against that particular challenge, right, of avoiding the tough conversation. You know, as you've learned that, get the external push, but as you've learned that inside of yourself, like, what are the assumptions that you had to let go of in order to, get to that point where you stop avoiding the tough conversation? What got you to a place where you didn't need the external push any longer?
Yeah, yeah. It's a very astute question. And this is something I've learned about myself. And everybody needs external voices to a different degree. I think early in my career, especially, and when I was a leader at a more junior level, external voices, particularly from traditional authority figures, sort of provided me with safety and a sense of order in a fast moving and chaotic universe. And what I needed to do was to develop confidence in my own inner voice and to get better at triangulating external advice, deciding which advice to accept and which advice maybe not to accept, and triangulating that with the quiet voice inside me and allowing that to speak to me at a larger volume. So I would say this all starts with self awareness. Self awareness goes way beyond being an effective leader in business or government or academia, right? Self awareness is a really important life skill. An important step for my growth, an important insight rather, was to sort of recognize my need for benevolent authorities and recognize my need to have rules asserted on me by an external agent as a first step to sort of cultivate my own self trust and develop faith in my own ability to handle uncertainty and danger with less of a need for external support.
Yeah, boy, I mean, anytime that you're saying self-awareness, you're truly speaking the language of the true leadership approach. At least in my,
Yeah.
it all begins with that. We can't affect anything that we cannot see. Yeah,
Yes.
and of course,
Yes.
those blind spots, assumptions, and limits that can hold us back in ways that we have no idea until we are able to see them.
Yeah.
And part of what you're saying also, it points to this larger developmental arc of a human being over time. It's something, one thing,
Yeah.
way that I put, I'm curious if this resonates with you, is, but like shifting from living from the outside in to living from the inside out, and how to not rely on those outside voices, but include them
Yes.
also, but also including your own internal compass
Yes.
as you move forward in the world.
Yes. I think you can put it that way, Ty. I think what I would say is being aware of whether you're somebody who lives from the inside out or the outside in, right? And being mindful about mixing appropriate levels of inside out versus outside in insights for any decision that you make.
I love that. Yeah, the inclusion of all of the information there. Fantastic. I'm curious. So I've already heard one way in which your growth has been helped along the way through mentorship. I'm also curious about, your journey over the past few years of your career. What's been the most valuable investment that you've made in yourself, in your own personal and leadership growth, whether a coaching program, a group, whatever it may be?
Yeah, I would say that in addition to establishing a really intimate and trusted set of former colleagues who are now my private and absolutely confidential external coaches, the other thing I would say is the most valuable investment that I've made in myself is meditation and elements of cognitive behavioral therapy to provide self-insight. Because, Ty, I know people who somehow feel as though they somehow compartmentalize work life from home life or work life from social life, and they believe they can behave in mindless, borderline sociopathic ways at work, and then they come home and they're really nice people. A former colleague of mine, Rajat Paharia, used to refer to such people as reverse vampires. They're really nasty to everybody during the day, and then they go home and they're really nice to their friends and their family and their church members and things like that.
Yeah.
I have seen leaders, including leaders who are very senior in an organization, who act like nasty teenagers. I've seen top leaders where I'm talking to you, Ty, and I talk to you about what a jerk Bob is, and then you know for a fact that when I talk to Bob, I'm gonna talk about what a jerk you are, right?
Boy, that is so
These sort of
damaging.
sort of psychologically unhealthy, jerky behaviors are things that pervade both your personal and your work life. They're not apart from one another. You can't compartmentalize them. And so growing as a human being using tools like the Enneagram, which is my favorite taxonomy of personality, to understand how to move towards a more healthier version of who you are. To me, that's the single best investment that I've made in myself because it transcends any specific domain for a given startup that I'm working with or any particular vertical market or any particular country in the world.
Well, I love that. It so deeply aligns with the way that I think about true leadership as well. Of course, a focus on who's there right at the center of absolutely everything, no matter where you go, whether it's at home with family or what kind of sector or whatever it is. I always think of the rising tide lifts
Yeah,
all boats, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
that focus on self awareness and personal growth certainly in my own life as well.
Yeah.
I see that ripple out effortlessly to absolutely every aspect of my life, and that's a bit of what I'm hearing there. So I love that. Leadership, of course, is also about what we're shaping for tomorrow. I've been really looking forward to this part of the conversation with you because I really already have accomplished so much with some extremely visionary companies already. But I'm really curious to hear what's your vision for your leadership, your legacy, or the impact that you want to have in the years ahead, Dave?
I want to play a role to change the way the global business community goes about its day. I've been lucky enough to have been exposed to the big five perspectives of innovation in action and see the effect that they have through my work with primarily with startups, right? I've been lucky enough to see design thinking, agile, lean, open innovation, and disruptive innovation play out. And my ambition is to help huge organizations all over the world to understand how the right combination of methods and tools from agile or lean or design thinking or whatever can help propel them forward into entirely new areas that they never could have achieved through typical new product introduction methods, typical mergers and acquisitions, typical vendor relationships, and so on.
Boy, that's incredible. So, what is it, and maybe this sort of, what do you imagine is the leadership that is going to be required of you? What's that growing edge for you now that's going to help you deliver on that vision?
Yeah. So the first thing is, I'll just mention two things. The first is anyone in leadership, any leadership team owes it to itself to be very aware of cognitive biases, right? If you and I are starting a new company to do, say, crowdfunded insurance, I don't know, and I'm convinced that it's only the millennials and Gen Z that'll buy, right? And so everything becomes a piece of evidence in favor of that, right? I'm using confirmation bias. You owe it to me, Ty, to say, hey, Dave, hang on. I think you're engaging in confirmation bias, and here's why. So moving beyond, being mindful of, reading books like Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, and the Undoing Project, and so on, and being mindful of the cognitive fallacies and the cognitive distortions that we all naturally fall prey to as human beings. That's one of my growing edges. If you define a growing edge as being the point where personal comfort meets fear and discomfort, representing an opportunity for growth. And another one, it's another angle on realizing that leaders do what needs to be done, not what they feel like doing or what's going to make people like them. So I need to keep telling myself, no. Don't worry if people are going to like me. Ask myself, do I like them? Right? Don't think about the right thing to say to you. Ask if you're saying the right thing to me. Right?
Mm.
Don't go seeking your approval. Ask if I'm willing to grant approval to you.
Mm.
And I mean, these things seem straightforward, but in terms of who I am and my own personal growth, these are things I continue to work on.
Beautiful. What I really hear in that is what we chatted a little about, I think, a little bit before we even pressed record here, which is
Yeah,
that true leadership it's an ongoing and an endless
yeah,
journey. And part of
that's
what
right.
I hear that is a commitment to
Sure.
consistently learning and growing. I love in particular I've got this little saying that I have that certainty is the death of clarity. And I
Yeah.
think about that anytime that we, have those cognitive biases or the assumptions, which are so natural to, take a moment of clarity, which is
Mhm.
open, and collapse it into certainty. And all of a sudden, we don't realize it, but become we've closed off to new information which could
Yes.
help expand our viewpoint even more. And what I hear in what you're saying is a practice of staying open to more information that could expand horizons and perception even more than what we even and especially when we think we've already got it.
Yes. Yes. And we owe it to ourselves, Ty, to become comfortable with ambiguity because the more you're doing something that can be completely defined, the more likely you are to lose your job to generative AI and soon.
Well, that might be the part that I clip and share with everybody because it might be the one. Yes, and absolutely. And boy, when you start talking about ambiguity and uncertainty, you certainly are talking about that edge that brings up the fear
Yes.
and the places that we have the biggest opportunity to grow. Well, so this has been an incredible conversation, thinking about, of course, what true leadership means to you, your vision for the future, what your growing edge is right here. This last question is it's less of a question than it is an invitation. You have the time and the space here to offer to our listeners whatever it is that is most in your heart and mind to share. Anything at all, floor is yours.
I so Ty, I want to remind you and also remind all of our listeners to live with gratitude. Look, I run a business. Many of the people listening to this run businesses, and it's easy to get weighed down because you get 5 emergencies before lunch. We all experience that if we're doing something substantial. The fact is, it is an incredibly exciting time to be a leader in any domain, in academia, in government, in finance, in business. And I believe that emerging technology, which people have, justifiable trepidations about, but I sincerely believe that emerging technology, coupled with reason, open exchange of ideas, humility, and tolerance, can help us address every global challenge facing us today and to build a better world for ourselves and for our children and for our grandchildren.
Well, Dave, I feel like I might want to call you up every now and again and have you say that to me, but I'll just go to the podcast recording so I don't take up any more of your time. I absolutely love that message, and I appreciate so much the wisdom that you've shared here today with me. I've gotten so much out of it myself, and I'm sure that whoever listens to this is equally going to benefit from all that you've shared today. Dave Blakely, thank you so much for being on the True Leadership Podcast.
It was tons of fun. Thank you.
Agreed. That's it for this episode of the True Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this to catch future episodes. This conversation was brought to you by One Mountain Leadership, where we help leaders grow the capacity, confidence, and presence of true leadership through the True Leadership approach. To learn more about the approach, our offerings, our community, and how we can help you realize your potential in both leadership and in life, visit us at onemountainleadership.com.